Hello, fellow poker players and Microgrinder Poker School students. Alton here, and I want to welcome you to our course on isolation raising limpers, or as we like to call it, ISO raising limpers. So this lecture is going to be a short lecture, and we're going to talk about why I created this course, and then we're going to do a quick overview of what you're going to get out of this course, specifically what we're going to cover. So let's talk about why I created this course. So I created this course to take a deeper dive look into the concept of the isolation raise. I've covered this concept in several different courses, and I've talked about it in numerous videos in many of my courses, not only here but also on YouTube. But I haven't done a really deep dive look into the theory and the strategy behind the ISO raise. And I feel it's important that we actually do a deep dive look at the ISO raise because I consider it one of the bread and butters of the micro stakes where we're facing weaker opponents, especially a lot of weak opponents that like to limp pre-flop. And with a lot of limping pre-flop, that gives us the opportunity to consider ISO raising our opponents. Now, a lot of people understand this theory in general, they understand this concept in general, and they understand the strategy in general, but I don't think a lot of people have done a deep dive look into it, and I want to make sure that you understand it on a more intimate detail. So I want to make sure you understand the strategy involved in ISO raising to make sure that you're doing it properly. So that's really the whole reason for this. Just take a deeper dive look into ISO raising, especially because this is really where we make a lot of our money at the micro stakes, where we're ISO raising against weaker opponents to face them heads up in a pot where we have skill advantage, sometimes we have card advantage, and sometimes we have positional advantage, but really comes down to our skill advantage more than anything else. Because if we think about it, a majority of our profits come from weaker opponents. So that's the reason for creating this course. Now, with that said, let's talk about the course overview. Let's talk about what we're going to cover. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to cover the isolation raise. We're going to make sure that you understand specifically what it is. So we're going to do a quick definition of that. Then we're going to talk about the types of limping pre-flop. So, is a person open limping or are they over limping? We're then going to talk about why we ISO raise, the benefits of it, and the importance of it at the micro stakes, which I kind of touched on here, but we're going to talk about it a bit more. Then we're going to talk about the two different types of limpers. There's two primary types of limpers, and depending upon the type of limper that we're facing, that's going to dictate how we ISO raise. We're then going to talk about our default ISO raising range. And then we're going to talk about exploitative ISO raising adjustments. So we should always have a general strategy regardless of what we do. And then we should look to deviate from it. We should look to make exploitative adjustments based upon the type of opponent that we're playing to look to increase our profitability when we're playing. From there, we're going to look at our ISO raise sizing, meaning our raise sizing. How big is it? How much should we make it? And what are the exploitative adjustments we can make to it? We're then going to talk about ISO raising single versus multiple limpers and take a look at the concept of combined full probability because when we're facing multiple different opponents versus one opponent, this concept of combined full probability really plays an important role in our strategy. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at some practice hand scenarios. I have some detailed ones in PowerPoint, and then we're going to take a look at Poker Tracker 4. So I have Poker Tracker 4 already up and running on my computer. We're going to pull up some hand histories. We're going to look at some opportunities to ISO raise, and we're going to talk about if we should or if we shouldn't ISO raise, and if we should, what the sizing should be. So that's the course in a nutshell. Let's go ahead, let's jump into it. I'll see you guys at the next lecture where we talk about the isolation raise.